No, no, no!
Look, I put it down like this. People chase the money right now, and right now the halal pound is very strong.
For a Muslim person to eat what is slaughtered according to the Islamic way of slaughtering the animals, that is called halal.
The halal food industry in the UK is estimated to be worth a staggering £1 billion. With Muslims accounting for only 5% of the population, the halal food industry is booming. This spectacular boom has been fueled by a few hubs like Birmingham, Manchester and Bradford, but today we'll be focusing on Newham in the East End of London. This buzzing borough has the highest concentration of halal food consumers in London and is home to some of the oldest halal food establishments in the UK. Big brands like KFC, Nando's and Subway are all halal in Newham. I'm Altaf, a food blogger from London, and today I'll be telling the story of halal food in Newham.
I feel very proud of it, alhamdulillah, very feel proud because I've done it everything with my own hand.
This halal contribution has completely changed the retail landscape of Newham. Shop fronts and the food scene is heavily influenced by this change and is very much a part of Newham. Today, 33% of small to medium enterprises in London are Muslim owned, and many of these revolve around food. We'll be looking at the how, what and when of this meteoric rise. Every journey begins with a single step, and it was those first steps taken by the earlier generations that helped pave the way to where we are today.
The Pakistani people, they wanted somewhere to buy their own, let's say, on those days you can't buy the lentil from the Tesco.
I caught up with some of the pioneers of the halal food industry, asking them about their motivations, experiences and memories of those early years.
People even used to sleep in the bathrooms on a bathtub. They used to put a big board on the bathtub, and I've seen a house where a person used to sleep in the bathroom on that time.
We'll look at the emotional scars left behind on a generation that sacrificed everything to build the foundation of halal food as we know it.
I said, go to have a pharmacy. And he said that, Abaji, we need the people to work for us. I'll be working with you. You work like that.
We'll look at a time where racism was rife and a generation that stood up and faced it head on.
History has taught us one thing, that whenever you suppress anyone or any one nation, they will always rise to the challenge. And therefore, people, the youngsters, start resorting to fighting back.
We'll find out how they lived, how they worked, and most importantly, how they got halal food. The story of British Asians starts somewhere in the late 1950s, with economic migrants arriving from the subcontinent to counter the post-war labour shortage.
I came to the United Kingdom December 1956. When I came to the London, and they used me get a coach from airport to Victoria. Then I got a taxi from there.
I arrived in UK 1962, July 21st. I was on the air, and in the morning 22nd, I was on the land of British government.
UK में April 64.
Workers would often arrive with just enough money to get them through a few days.
I had only £5 in pocket. There were so many people. It was not difficult to hire a car. I asked the car, I'm going to Plasto somewhere. And he said, all right. He got so many other 2-3 passengers as well. So instead of taking £5, he took only £1 from me, and I reached at the destination where I wanted.
Living conditions were harsh. The migrants were predominantly men who arrived without their families and often ended up living in overcrowded accommodation.
यहाँ की हालत तो ये थी कि एक मकान एक कमरे में 5, 6, 7 आदमी रहते थे। शिफ्ट वाइज वो सोना और काम पर जाते थे। हम लोगों ने यहाँ बड़ी अरसा मेहनत की है, स्पेशली इस न्यू होम में बहुत कुछ बिल्ड किया। इनके यहाँ तो सिर्फ टॉयलेट भी बाहर होता था, बाथरूम का तो कंसेप्ट ही नहीं था। यहाँ तो सिर्फ यही पब्लिक बाथ में, वो प्लास्टो में होती थी, पब्लिक बाथ में हफ्ते के बाद जाना नहाना।
People even used to sleep in the bathrooms on a bathtub. They used to put a big board on the bathtub, and I've seen a house where a person used to sleep in the bathroom on that time, because there were about 15-20 people in a 4-bedroom house.
Many of this generation were ready to take on any jobs and ended up doing hard labor to earn their keep.
There was a friend of mine, he said, why don't you do the night watchman job? On those days, these lights, J. Murphy, that was responsible, to put wherever they dig the road to put the electric or gas, they put the lights. It was not an electric light, it's been just a lamp. And it was my duty to put those lamps by the roadside.
I work in British Paint. Used to be paint factory, work there. Then I live there, go to a flower factory. Then I live there, because as I go along, my English is getting better, and I'm getting, used to it. Then I got another job in Walthamstow, molding job, making car compounds.
Many Asians came with a hope to forge a better life for themselves and brought with them their religious identity. It was the Muslims amongst this group that needed to establish a means of acquiring halal food to adhere to their religious beliefs. So our story begins on Gage Road in Canning Town, which was the hub for much of the development of the halal food industry in Newham.
When I was living at Star Lane, one day I passed through that passage, which again there are so many flats. Passing those flats becomes the Gage Road, and I saw the board that this shop or this house is complete, this is for auction. I said, all right, I should buy it. I find out where the auction will be. The auction was near the Trafalgar Square. I went there, and auction started from £1,000. And in those days, it's been not hundreds, it's been £10, £15, and one person reached up to 1,360. And I said 1,365. And thereafter no one speak, and they put the hammer and said, it's done. So I got that place. The property which I bought was 1 Gage Road, Canning Town.
My uncle used to live in 9 Gage Road. So I stayed with him. With the landlord was there night. Everybody go to work in the morning walking. And one day my landlord asked me, he said, why are you not going to look for a job? I said, there's no buses. And the word he said, we all go. Are you some kind of son of Lord or something? I didn't like it very much. But next day I went and I got a job straight away. So he laughs. He said to me, son, I know you didn't like my word, but in the end, it helped you, didn't it?
There was a support network of people that would take their fellow countrymen in and help them find their feet.
If they know that certain person from the word of mouth, if they hear that there's a certain person who's come over from abroad and he hasn't got a job yet, then everybody would just jump up and say, well, does he need any help? Then if they do, then they would help them. If they need cash, they would help them with cash. If they need a room, they would give them a place to sleep.
Every generation has heroes, and it was people like Haji Fazl Dad who were the bedrock of the community, arranging for work, housing and finance.
My first paternal cousin, Haji Fazl Dad Sahib, may Allah bless his soul, he came to the UK in 1948, between 1948 and 50. So he was the first person amongst this family who started the halal meat business in London. He really helped everyone, anyone with any kind of a need, whether it's financial, whether it's accommodation problem, he would help. If anybody wants to open up a business, he would help that person to open up a business. I don't think in this day and age you would see a person like him. He was an angel.
I come to one of my uncle, and when I got there, he wasn't home, and I was worried, and there was a man called Chacha Fazal. Everybody called him Chacha. I said, where's my uncle? He said, don't worry, you're here now. He make a food for me, eat it, and he took me to meet him.
Praying is a pillar of the Islamic faith, so the Muslims of that era went about organising themselves, building mosques and community centres. Some of the first recorded mosques in the UK were right here in Newham. The first mosque in Newham was Canning Town Mosque, which was a house on Liverpool Road. During the early periods, it was common for houses to be used as mosques. But as the Muslim community grew, they required larger places to accommodate worshippers. Records indicate that in 1983, the mosque on Liverpool Road moved to 269 Barking Road in Canning Town and was purchased for £38,000. This mosque still continues to serve the Muslim community to date. The early Muslims also went about establishing their own halal meat and grocery stores. This was mainly to serve their own community.
Haji Fazl Dad, he had a shop which was just a grocery shop. Then he realized that the Muslim community in the East London area, starting from Aldgate East all the way to Newham. It started from Aldgate, but then it all shifted to Newham in Barking Road in Plaster. He realized that Muslims are struggling to find halal meat and poultry. People used to bring chickens from chicken farms, slaughter them in their backyard.
Halal is very important for the Muslims and is deeply entrenched in their tradition.
For a Muslim person to eat what is slaughtered according to the Islamic way of slaughtering the animals, that is called halal.
The pioneers of the halal food trade would go to slaughterhouses and perform halal slaughter. This developed into hiring abattoirs and eventually having their own slaughterhouses.
There was one slaughterhouse which I knew as well. They allowed to slaughter to the Muslim by halal way, and even it's been not only rely on those person who says it's wholesale, it's halal. I went myself as well, and I saw the person, Muslim person, doing this slaughtering and separating the items.
Every morning, when I will go, I have to leave 4 o'clock from here to cross the London before get too much traffic, and get there, and you have to be. They start 7:30. In English trade, and you want to be making halal, you need to be there before they start. Otherwise, they don't wait for you. So we have to get there earlier. I usually get about 7 o'clock before they can put me all gear and everything, get my knife ready, and we used to do.
I was also a slaughterman. I used to slaughter chickens, I used to slaughter lambs and sheep, I used to slaughter cows. I had to travel all the way from here to Carlisle every weekend. There was an English slaughterhouse which we used to hire to slaughter our livestock. So I would go there on a Saturday night, or sometimes Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday. I would stay there 2 days. I had to slaughter the cows and the sheep and everything. Then from there we get the haulage company. They would deliver that to East Ham, and we had to unload that ourselves. Nowadays you will find any company who's come to deliver you something, they have the people to help them to unload the stuff, but we had to do it ourselves.
The early shops were not glamorous, often having just the bare necessities, but they served a very important purpose.
We only have one counter. We only have a shop, right around, and one on the middle. That's it.
There weren't any displays like this display you can see here. We just used to have it in the fridge. People used to ask for which part of meat they want, whether they want shoulder, leg, or chicken, or whatever. We had to go in the cold room at the back and bring that piece of meat that they want, and we used to clean it and chop it up for them.
The early shopkeepers introduced exotic fruit and vegetables to the retail landscape of Newham. Many items which are sold in mainstream supermarkets today.
We used to sell bindi, okra, which is called okra as well, kaddu, and green chilies, and the aubergines, and almost all the Indian and Pakistani vegetables.
The Pakistani people, they wanted somewhere to buy their own, let's say, on those days you can't buy the lentil from the Tesco, because they did not know what is lentil, or any item is Pakistani, or this masala, they did not know.
I wonder if Mr. Sethi would ever have thought lentils would be sold in supermarkets across the UK, and that his contribution, in fact, opened up the British palate to subcontinental foods. Many of the early generation had to work superhuman shifts in order to make ends meet.
I drive myself. Our first job was in Acton, Asden, Wilsden, Cricklewood, Kilburn, Finsbury Park, Dalston, then Ilford. The last come into my shop by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I start 4 o'clock in the morning. One man do the driving, do the delivering. The very first shop was in Acton, and his fridge was in the down basement. You have to put it on his fridge. It's very hard work, we have done. Very, very hard work.
एक दफ़ा रात को मैं गोश्त लेके आया ना, तो ये ग्रीन स्ट्रीट वाली ट्रैफिक लाइट के पास है यार, तो मुझे नहीं अंदाजा था कि टाइम क्या हुआ। काम में इतने थके हुए थे तो पुलिस वाले ने मुझे डोर खोल कर कहा गुड मॉर्निंग, तो मैंने बोला गुड इवनिंग। तो मुझे कहता टाइम देखा है, मैंने बोला नहीं, कहता टाइम देखो अपनी घड़ी में।
This often affected their home life, and many sacrificed comforts we take for granted today to provide for their families. Mohammed Rashid of Kashmir Food Stores has spent near enough his whole adult life working in the halal food trade, and so did his son, who sacrificed a career in pharmacy to help run the family business.
My son was managing the shop while we was running the meat industry outside, but in weekend we were still there. I used to be working on the butchery. My brother used to be work there, but he mainly runs the grocery. My son in Newham College, he come very first number to come. He come chemistry and biology number 1. They put in a new paper, and I asked him. I said, go to have a pharmacy. And he said that, Abaji, we need people to work for us. I'll be working with you. He worked like that.
His son Javed tragically passed away in June 2020 while on holiday in Pakistan.
3 months before my son, 6th of March, I lost my wife. And 23rd June, I lost my oldest son.
Just meeting Mr. Rashid really brought out the sacrifice that he and his family made. And you can tell he still feels the emotional burden of his eldest son also going through the trials and tribulations he faced and not pursuing a career in pharmacy. The British government encouraged Asian immigrants to bring their family members over so the workforces could be replenished and to kickstart the economy.
When I was walking one day, it's been Tottenham Court Road, there was a college. It's outside there is written, if you want to learn or someone is wanting to learn English, so we will give you the certificate, and without a problem of any of the passport, they will issue the passport and you could invite it. I invited my younger brother, Muhammad Khalid Sethi, from Pakistan. Then another brother, Muhammad Farooq Sethi, from Pakistan. And when I got the shop, we opened that shop and they were working in the shop.
This tremendous work ethic and sacrifice was one of the qualities passed on to later generations.
We took over that shop and we were running that shop in very early 70s. After I finished school, I needed to work because family needed financial support, and I was the only son in that family in the UK. So I couldn't go for further study, so I had to stand in the shop and start to learn this meat business and chopping the meat and so. So me and my brother-in-law, we were running that shop.
As the population of Newham continued to grow, the regeneration of many areas within the borough was necessary to keep up with rising demand.
Gage Road was demolished in the late 70s, 79, 78, something like that.
We ran the shop about 12 years, and on those days with the government or local authority, they said it's been, we are going to buy this shop because we are going to renew the area. So there was compulsory buying. So we saw it's been all right. It's been they gave money about, I think, 12,000 or 14,000. I don't remember that.
Because they were old houses, and the council that time, they decided to demolish the old houses and build a new housing estate there. So it's nothing like that anymore. We could find old pictures, and if you see the old pictures, you will see a lot of difference. You wouldn't believe that this was Gage Road once in the 60s and 70s. So it has modernized now. Gage Road is nothing as it used to be back in the days.
After the foundational years of the halal food industry, a second generation emerged, who didn't have the language and cultural barriers that the early generations had. The UK was their home, and that security helped them carve out an identity for themselves. This generation was made with fathers that worked long hours and mothers that worked on sewing machines.
I'm from Newham. I came to East Ham when I was 3, so I've literally, and I'm still there now, and I'm sort of 50. Coming from an Asian background, our parents, they struggled a lot because, they worked in factories or they worked in warehouses. A lot of the mums worked on the machines. It was hard, so, and then, a lot of the times, we were living in a room with sort of, sharing a house with several families, and each family would have a room. And that's how I remember my childhood. And then obviously, eventually they saved all their pennies and then they eventually bought a house. But it was a hard struggle back in the early 70s that I remember.
The language that everyone spoke was food. With halal butcher shops becoming more common and halal meat more readily available, the next step was halal food in restaurants. Sweet and Salt was located on Barking Road and was one of the earliest recorded halal restaurants in the borough. But restaurants like these only catered for their own community. The halal food scene expanded beyond cultural boundaries and attracted customers from a diverse range of backgrounds. On the food journey, a key moment was when Iftikhar Khan and his business partner Amjad opened the first kebabish on Green Street. It was right here in Newham where this restaurant chain was born, and it went on to have over 100 restaurants across the UK and set the blueprint for the halal restaurant franchise as we know it.
Well, the setup was somewhat different because the prior setups to us, where the kitchen was normally at the back, the front was purely to display food. We changed all of that. we brought theatre kitchen in. We were the first people that brought your kitchen to the front so people could see the food being cooked. That added to the whole theatre. The first chicken doner we sold was back in 1983. We were the first people that actually started doing things like your mixed platters, mixed grills. Because we specialize in grill foods, as the label says, Thrill of the Grill, we then made a conglomerate of these grill food types and presented them on platters with sizzling trays. We again changed our kitchens, and we started then made sure we made a point of cooking our naan breads and our karais, tarkas, throwing flame, and so the customers can see your hot tawa plates where we can cook food. And everything was kind of geared towards fresh cooking. None of that old kitchen at the back with food coming on a trolley, not knowing when it was cooked. The emphasis for us was, no, we'll cook it for you, we'll cook it fresh. This particular one shop, because of the uniqueness and certain things that we're doing, which were quite unique to the market at the time, we constantly had queues. A lot of people were trying to sort of emulate, copy, in fact. And we thought it's time for us to take this idea to the masses. So we then took on another shop in East Ham, developed that. Then took on another one in Seven Kings, developed that. So initially the idea was to set our own sort of flagship stores, if you like, run them properly, make sure they were successful. Everything about them had to be perfect. In order for, and they were the launch pads actually for the franchise itself.
The transition of early Muslims was not an easy one. They had often faced discrimination and sometimes violence.
There were the skinheads, then the National Front and the Teddy Boys and all that kind of stuff. We faced all that things in these eras in the past. You would get a lot of racist remarks from English people. Even if they walk past your shop, they would turn around, look at you in your shop and call you Paki, you smell of curry. So they wouldn't come into the shop. It wasn't like it is now. They eat curry and everything. They get on with, they love Pakistani food and Indian food. But back in the days, it was difficult.
It was pretty tough. A lot of mental scars were experienced by a lot of the young kids. Paki bashing was a very common thing, a phrase I don't necessarily like to use, but it was something that was very common. I think it was the early 80s. This was a time when things were almost in balance, where you had a lot of the racist factions, and then you had, the anti-fascist movement, which was the young Asians, coupled with also English people. And it was that time, and the Asians were sick and tired of being ill-treated, shops being smashed, beaten up, being humiliated for absolutely no reason. So that, as I mentioned, sparked the whole, sort of that certain culture of fighting back, certain gangs, boys that were not scared to now fight back. Newham 7 was an incident that happened on Green Street. I believe happened in the Duke of Edinburgh, which is on the corner of Plashet Road, I believe, off of Green Street. And so it was that particular time when you had the skinheads or the racists of the time. And again, they were confronted because I think just previous to this incident, I think they'd gone around, smashed up some shops, which was a normal occurrence, but not anymore. And so basically a fight broke out, and I think 7 of the Asian boys were arrested as a result, and I think 3 from the other side.
According to the police, the whole affair began with a fight outside the Duke of Edinburgh pub in Green Street, Plaistow, between Asians and whites. Eventually 7 Asians and 3 whites were arrested. But the defence have said that the incident at the Duke of Edinburgh pub, described today as a fortress of white racists, was the end of a sequence of events, not the beginning.
I think in some ways that marked also the end of the whole racist era. because it made a huge statement at the time to say, no more, no more. I think the food was definitely the cohesion between the two cultures.
Iftikhar had much to say about the discrimination he faced growing up, but it felt like he was over it and he doesn't bear any grudges. Once the blueprint was set, other businesses followed suit, with many halal restaurant chains popping up. There was a change in consumer demand. Taste had changed, restaurants had changed, people had changed.
I've been in the pizza business for almost 20 years, and I've seen the shift change in terms of people's palates. People do want high-end, good quality pizza, but they want halal. It's missing in the market, and a lot of them are tired of eating sort of what a chicken and chip shop would create for a pizza is not pizza. So a pizza is actually a work of art, and a lot of effort goes into it. That's why Domino's, Papa John's, Pizza Hut, they are almost world leaders in what they do, is because they've taken the art of pizza, you know, and they've sort of massed it. But that seems to be missing in the halal market.
My current restaurant that we got now, HS & Co, it's a real kind of door opener to the Western cuisine for the halal market. All of my restaurants, all of them, the kitchen has been 100% halal, all of them. It's been very difficult when you get in certain things. My first own restaurant, when it was the Spanish and Moroccan, you couldn't get chorizo, for example. I had to make my own chorizo because it was impossible to find halal chorizo, impossible. So I had to make my own. What we are seeing now are that these ingredients that are specific to non-Muslim countries are now becoming halal, and that's something that's made my job so much easier.
The regeneration that came with the Olympics also introduced a new dimension to this borough, which was already brimming with culture. Shop fronts were updated to reflect a more modern, upmarket Newham, and new types of food were being introduced, targeting a higher ticket spend consumer.
What I find now is that with Asians that have more higher disposable income, their palates have changed. They want to experiment, they want good quality, and they're happy to pay the prices. So I've seen a shift in the market, and now if we look at the sort of the chicken businesses or the other sort of restaurants that come up, they're coming up to a very high standard, high caliber, high ticket spend, because they're aiming for a different type of market. So there is a shift.
Halal ingredients from around the world are now available that have never been available before, allowing restaurateurs to be creative and present food in new, innovative ways. This has seen a new generation of restaurant owners introduce menus that reach far beyond the traditional Muslim consumer.
We have an ingredient called Chipotle Barbacoa beef. So what Barbacoa is, basically it means it's almost like slow cooked barbecue beef, which is then shredded. So it's smoked, so we have that as halal. I source my chorizo from a supplier direct from Spain. I have another topping which is really interesting, which is called induja. That comes from a small town just off Italy called Calabria.
A dessert culture started to emerge, mainly fueled by younger Muslim entrepreneurs wanting to do something different. Halal food extended into this market, with dessert parlours opting for fully halal menus.
My shop name is Candy Floss Creperie. Before I get some products from anyone, I make sure I get the ingredients, the toppings they put in, what it contains, especially for them, make sure this is halal, because I do say to customers everything is halal. The top selling obviously is the dessert shop. So we sell quite a lot. Our waffles are very popular actually. The number one selling probably the waffles, and then cookie doughs, and then comes the crepes. We just recently started pancake as well, and drinks. Bubble tea is one of the best selling.
The diversity in the population of the borough meant new markets to cater for. With the introduction of many African immigrants, the second highest ethnic group in Newham, and changes of taste for young Asian consumers, innovation in the halal food space was inevitable. The Halal Food Festival is a platform to showcase the diversity and economic viability of halal food. It takes place every year, and I've been attending for many years. There's always amazing food on display, and it's a fixture in any foodie's calendar. I caught up with Waleed, the director of the Halal Food Festival, to find out what's next for the halal food industry.
Just Eat, Uber Eats and Deliveroo. 5 years ago, you would never find a halal tab. From last year, all three of them have now got a subheading called halal. I'll give you a very, very simple fact. 5% of the UK population is Muslim. That's a fact. However, over 35% of the meat in this country is halal. The future of halal is so bright. Why? Only in the last 3 years have the multiples like Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Morrison's, Asda, all stocking halal meat.
After talking to some of the pioneers of the halal food industry, I felt humbled and very much appreciative of the hard work they put in so I can enjoy halal food today. I'm also excited by the prospect of new food types and amazing restaurants and chefs being able to create wondrous food that can be enjoyed by everyone. Today we only scratched the surface, but I feel proud of what the Muslim community has achieved and what they've contributed to Newham and the positive impact of halal food on this amazing borough's high streets. That brings us to the end of our journey, but I'll continue to document and most importantly, eat all this tasty halal food.